I'm back, and today I want to talk about connecting chords and pentatonic scales. So this is a really, I don't know if I should say essential, but this is a really basic skill. Some of you probably already know this, but some of you probably don't. It took me a while to kind of figure this out, which is, I guess, kind of stupid on my part. But I want to show you a way you can do this to create those kind of fills you hear in pop music or rock music, etc. When I was a kid, I loved Jimi Hendrix. I still do, actually. And I always wondered, like, how does he get those little fills in there and, do all those little chordal things while he's playing rhythm that sound almost like leads? So this will hopefully help you with that. So before we get started, let's go over some basics. So one of the first things is pentatonic scales. So I'll just go over these quickly. I assume most of you know these, but just in case you don't, let's go over it. So I'll start here on A. I'll do A, I guess, minor pentatonic first. Next position. Next position. Next position. And the last position. Okay, so it's easy enough. I assume most of you are familiar with that. And there's one other thing we need to go over, and that's just basic chord shapes, which I'm sure all of you know, but this is just for completeness. So this is just A major bar chord here. Another way to play it here. Sound a little bit out of tune, sorry about that. And then up here. And then here. And same thing with minor. And here. And here. Okay. So the reason I'm showing you these is because this is what we're going to be connecting. So the first one you see here, the A major. So what I usually use to kind of like paste on top of this is this major pentatonic. And then for this shape here, I use this one. Easy enough, right? And up here. And here. There you go. These are all the same notes. I'm using the same fingerings I showed you before and just using them in the context of this, so everything matches up. Same thing with minor. And here. And here. And here. Okay. So you can see how all those connect together. And if you haven't practiced connecting all these together, if you don't know these shapes that well, practice them. They'll really help you out, and it will make this a lot more useful. But let's get into it. So basically what you do is you take something like this shape, and then every once in a while you throw in a little lead lick from that pentatonic scale. So if I have something like this, it's very boring, but if I go, still not super interesting, but you can kind of understand, like, okay, you can kind of put like some lead licks and things like that in there to kind of spice things up. And in fact, if you're writing the song yourself, or if you like not tied to this rhythm, you can kind of fill in those things instead of playing the chord. So you could do all sorts of things with it to kind of spice things up and turn it into more of a riff. So if you have a piano player or another guitar player, you can be playing like pentatonic riffs while they're playing the actual rhythm pattern. And same thing goes with minor, but you probably don't need to see a demonstration of that. The real fun comes in when you have more than one chord. You switch from one chord to another. So let's say if we take a basic chord progression, like if you saw my 7 common chord progressions, the emotional girl chord progression, it's like A minor, or say A major, 1, E major, 5, F sharp minor, 6, and then D major, 4. So a very common one. And we can take that and spice that up by using some of these pentatonic scales in there. So let me try to demonstrate here. Okay, something like that. Maybe not the best example, but at least that gives you an idea. And so that's one of the reasons it's good to learn all the different shapes, because you don't know if, like for example, like this D chord, where I'm going from F sharp here, I can slide down and play here. I can play it also here if I want. I could even do it farther up if I wanted to. I could play here. Or any other place. I don't want to go through all the positions again. But you see, the more versatility you have with this, the more things you can do with that. And just for ideas, some of the things I like to do with that are like the hammer-ons and the double stops. So doing something like this, or those types of things. Those are things you oftentimes hear in like Hendrix playing, but not only Hendrix, but tons of other people. If you want to check out more things like this, I recommend listening to Jimi Hendrix, but also Steve I has some good stuff on this, like Seattle Boy. And I think if you look online, he did a Grammy performance with Nelly Furtado years ago, maybe like 15 or 20 years ago now. And he used this as the accompaniment in the background. He did some really cool things with harmonics and this type of stuff in there. But definitely check out double stops, hammer-ons, and a bunch of other things to kind of spice this up. And this is kind of like maybe like rock ballad playing, but you can also use this in just straight R&B. In R&B, they also do something similar. So one thing they'll do is they'll take something like a A minor seventh like this, and they'll spice it up with like some hammer-ons, like for example, like that, or those types of things. And they're just like small little moves, but they're like really cool, and they add kind of like some spice to what you're doing. So that's really cool for something like funk, R&B, etc. And it all comes from pentatonic scale. So you have A minor 7, but pentatonic. So you can add all those kind of like fills and things in there. And it works with lots of different styles. And not only that, you can also use this for like soloing. So a few years ago, I was playing in a band, and I wouldn't get like the charts to the song until like maybe one day before the performance. And I don't have time to work out a solo for that. I barely have enough time to even, like make sure I can play everything correctly. So I just had to look at the sheets and solo from the chords that were on there. And sometimes it's easy, you can analyze it quickly, but sometimes it's like if you had, like in this case where I was doing like 4 new songs or something, I can't memorize the chord changes to all the songs, so I have to look there and, come up with something quick. And for jazz, kind of used to it, but this wasn't a jazz gig. It was more like a folk or pop rock. So for that, something like this with the pentatonics works better. So let me see if I can give you an example. Let me think of a good chord progression here. I'll do one a little bit different. So let's see. I'll keep with A. So let me see, like A major, F sharp minor, D major, E major. That's kind of like the Police song, isn't it? So let me show you something like you could do with that. So I'll do it one time playing the bass notes, then the next time I'll do it with no bass notes. So here, I'll let you hear it. Okay. Hopefully without the bass notes, you could still kind of hear the chords and you could hear the changes. So that's one of the great things about using this is you can kind of play through the changes. And although it's maybe not as good as playing arpeggios or playing something in a jazzy way, as you can hear, it doesn't sound like jazz. It's almost like a sweeter rock style of playing. So it works really well for something like pop rock or just plain pop. And another good thing is if it's something more difficult than the standard like 1-4-5 or something like this where you have like one chord that's out of key, using this will, allow you to play something nice in key. So even though there might be some crazy chord you've never seen before that you're like, where did this come from? So like I don't know, a D over C chord like this. You're like, what is that? I've never seen that in my rock playing before. But this one, if you just remember the same thing, it's like, okay, D over C. So C is a major chord, so just play C major pentatonic. Or sorry, in this case it's D over C, so D major pentatonic. Like I said, there's all sorts of things you can do with this. I just showed you kind of like the basics here today. I don't want this to be too long. But you can also do the same thing with sus chords. So if you have like a 7 sus chord like this, there's a pentatonic you can play for that also. So you can play something like this. So that's another one of the shapes. And if you watch my video on the Japanese pentatonic, you've probably found out there's other things you can do with that too. So you can use all sorts of different pentatonics, mix it up, and come up with all sorts of new sounds. And hopefully this will be easier for you since it's the pentatonic and most of you are familiar with that. It's a nice jumping off place to kind of, I shouldn't say break you out of the pentatonic because it's kind of keeping you in the pentatonic, but breaking you out of those like same old blues licks you might be playing into something hopefully more melodic and something that follows the chords. But anyways, if you like this, please give it a thumbs up. If you have a comment about it, leave it below. And if you haven't subscribed, do that. But until next time, thanks and see you.